Welcome back to Curious Crossroads. I'm Doug. This is my son, Doug. And today we have Tom Maher, Minnesota's MUFON State Director. MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. It's a group dedicated to investigating and understanding UFO sightings. I believe across the country there's something like 4,000 members. Tom's been fascinated by the paranormal since childhood, and he's spent years exploring the unknown. He's a field investigator and helps others navigate the mysteries around us. Tom, welcome to Curious Crossroads.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me.
So what exactly do you do at MUFON? Like, what is your role?
So I'm the state director. I'm the main contact for the state. So I kind of organize the field investigators and the chief investigators and kind of do all that. We have a monthly in-person meeting. So I participate and I present that and I kind of host that and I take on all the challenges and questions. It's a lot of training and kind of just keep the organization up and running. And I check in after to report to the global headquarters on a yearly basis, give them a big update on what we did in the past year, go down to the annual symposium and do some training and do some meetings on that and stuff. So yeah.
Where's the global headquarters at?
Currently, the global headquarters is in Ohio. It was in California, but now moved to Ohio.
Is it just across the country?
We are global. We're global. But of course, our sightings, most of our sightings are in America. Then I think it's like Canada and UK. And then the numbers start dropping down and down and down. And you might look at that and go, oh, well, that must be because the ETs or whatever it is only interested in the U.S. Well, that's not necessarily true. When you look at what countries are submitting sightings and stuff, as those numbers go down, you're seeing fewer and fewer English-speaking people. You're seeing fewer and fewer people with computer access. So it's not necessarily that there's fewer sightings out there as much as they might not even know about us. I'll still get people from the United States who will send us reports. Maybe I'll get a couple times a year. They'll go, I saw this 20 years ago. I'd never heard of you guys. I didn't know I could report it to somebody. So the countries with lower sightings a lot of times, and right now our websites are all in English. So if you don't read English, how do you submit a report to us? So now that we're working on getting it translated into other different languages, but it's not as simple as translate this sentence into that sentence. You have to have someone who naturally speaks that language to read it and go, yes, that makes sense. Because if you just do a straight translation, it's not necessarily going to make sense. So it has to be kind of contextually valid. So we're trying to get that set up for more languages, but right now it's mainly just English. So
is it still UFO? I hear aerial...
UAP.
Yeah.
Unidentified aerial phenomena?
Well, and that keeps changing too. For a while, it was unidentified aerial phenomenon. But when you look at the phenomenon, we've got things in the air, we've got things underwater, and allegedly things in space. So it's not necessarily aerial. So they've kept UAP, but they've changed it to unidentified anomalous phenomenon. So anything that's really, they can't really identify what it is, they'll throw, and because anomalous kind of covers everything. So
why do you think they changed it originally from UFO to UAP?
That's a good question. It's kind of, so it's funny because the UFO term or technology or acronym came out back in, way back in the 40s and 50s, and the government, and so here's me speaking off the cuff, so maybe this isn't verified, but here's my take on it. The government and the media and whatnot, they kind of stigmatized the acronym of UFO. They kind of make fun of people and kind of like, oh, you're one of those UFO nuts or UFO freaks or whatever. So it kind of lost lots of credibility. Well, now the government and the military, they want the credibility back. Well, they can't get the credibility back by saying UFO. They need something else. So they kind of ruined UFO, but now they want it back. So they got to come up with something else that people can identify with. And UAP isn't as common, but it's more people are hearing about it now. So,
and just to be clear too, the main thing here is that the government is actually coming forward and saying that these are actually real now. Right? I mean, they're at least before it was stigmatized, they would try to tell people they were crazy, but now
they're having hearings.
Yeah, there was a big meeting back in before Congress, I think in like 2005 or so, where lots of physicists came and stuff and said, this is the real deal. And it got a little bit of news coverage and it kind of died down again. But then there was the congressional hearings a few years ago when the whole Tic Tac thing got really big and they came out and said, yep, this is, and that's the thing too. So I don't mean to knock the government, but sometimes I got to knock the government because Project Blue Book and all that kind of in the late 60s, they said, we're folding, we're done, we're not looking into this anymore. Well, now when they had these things for the Tic Tac just recently, a few years ago, they're saying, oh yeah, back when we were looking at this in 1999 and 2000, well, they've never stopped. I mean, they say they've stopped, but I don't believe they've ever stopped. And I've heard and I've seen. So again, you kind of go, is this real or not? I've seen an alleged chapter from a United States Air Force pilot training manual. a chapter that addresses the whole still UFO at the time, UFO phenomenon. Well, if they're not looking into it and they're not doing anything with it, why is there a chapter in the training book about the phenomenon? So it's a fair question.
I think I've seen that too. Don't they even talk about different ETs or something like that within it?
Yeah, I
like
think
the different
so.
species and different things like that. We were going to bring up Dr. J. Allen Hynek.
Oh,
Are you
yeah.
familiar with him?
Oh, yes, very much so. Yep.
So he's an investigator too, right?
He was, yes.
was.
Yep. He was actually one of the civilian lead investigator for Project Blue Book. They actually took him on because they, as the military, the Air Force, wanted to give some credibility to their investigation of UFOs, so they have to have someone non-military to come in and kind of lead it up. And he was a very, very well-respected physicist, I think, on the collegiate level, and they took him in, and he was the civilian representative on Project Blue Book. So.
And I think the whole point of Project Blue Book, the government was trying to disprove the stuff.
I think they were trying to disprove it. Well,
but then Dr. J. Allen Hynek, after the fact, was like, I think there's actually something going on here. That was kind of what I got from it.
And I'm not convinced they were trying to disprove it. I think they were trying to make the witnesses look bad and discredit the witnesses. But my personal opinion, I think they were just gathering data because I think they were taking it very seriously. Because after the Roswell incident and all that, I think they knew there was something happening here. And pick your conspiracy theory. There's so many stories and things. You can just go down the rabbit hole forever. So did some of the presidents meet with the ETs? And so I think they really wanted to gather as much data as they could. And once they kind of gathered as much data as they could, they said, okay, let's just leave it for now. And they'll continue off on their own. So
the other thing I was going to ask too, like with you guys with the MUFON, when you get those reports, are you essentially just archiving them? Do you guys report them to someone else? What are you doing with the reports?
Are you actually investigating?
We are actually investigating. So we have I'm a field investigator. We've got other field investigators. We've got a couple chief investigators here in Minnesota. So the report initially goes to global headquarters, and they kind of do some checking on it and stuff, and then they'll send it to the various chapters. The chapters, I'll get notified when a sighting happens in Minnesota, and then our chief investigators take a look at it, and they assign it to our field investigators. And there's all sorts of different rankings and things, but we try to determine what the people saw, and sometimes we're able to determine what it is, and it's not unknown ET stuff, and then other times we can't determine what it is. Is it ET stuff? We don't know, but we're not able to determine what it is, and sometimes that changes. So we try to get our cases done within 90 days, and say we've got a case closed and we've determined it's unidentified. And this actually happened. We had cases that when the Starlink satellites first started launching, we didn't know what they were initially either. So the first couple that came through Minnesota, they got closed as unidentified aerial phenomenon, unknown UAPs, we would call them. But then once the new information came out, even though the case is closed, we're always able to go back in and change our conclusions if new evidence shows up. So once we kind of realized what those were, then we had to go back and change those cases. And we got Minnesota, we average about 6 to 8 cases a month. When the Starlink satellites happened, we started getting like 18 to 20 a month. And they just skyrocketed up, which is kind of good and bad, but it does tell us that people are out there looking. When they see stuff, they know about us and they know to report to us. So there's that kind of tells us, gives us a feel for what's out there in the population. So that was a good thing that the cases jumped up. So
the people that are calling you saying, hey, I experienced this, they actually want to be investigated. They're welcoming it, right? They want you to come and prove that, hey, yep, this was a real deal.
That's tough. Because some people some people are really excited about it. It's a very positive thing for them. Some people, so we do get some hoaxes. So some people are submitting hoaxes. Not a lot, but it happens. And then some people, I think they want to report it, but they just are very uncomfortable with the whole situation and the whole stigma. And they don't want to talk to us. They want us to know, but they don't want to talk to us. So it varies from case to case and person to person. So
are you looking at, as far as when you go out to visit with somebody that said that they saw this, do you have like a little criteria? Like, first off, or do they seem like they're a nut job? Do you do things like what was his name in the book? The
J. Allen Hynek. So you guys are
Hynek.
Basically like a modern day Project Blue Book, kind of.
Well, J. Allen Hynek and his assistant Jacques Vallée, we actually use the Vallée classifications to classify the cases. So
that's what I was going to ask.
A lot of the stuff from Project Blue, I'm not saying we picked up where Project Blue Book left off, but there's kind of a continuation there. And it kind of gets there's a little bit of controversy there too, because MUFON will state that we started in 1969. It was actually the Midwest UFO Network. It was Wisconsin and Minnesota and Michigan and Illinois and a bunch of these states were the Midwest UFO Network. But one of our members of our chapter has been trying to really get all the history of Minnesota MUFON. And he's found out that the roots of Minnesota MUFON go back earlier than 1969, back to the 50s. So he's arguing that MUFON started in Minnesota, but that's neither here nor there. So
I guess what I'm asking is, when you go out and visit with one of these people, are you just getting a statement, or do you have a criteria to ask them to find? Like, was there somebody else that was there with them that can help, to corroborate what they saw?
Yeah.
I guess in the book that we were talking about, he would look at education level and all these other things to kind of find out if it's valid or not.
And I did do a tangent, so I was going, I'm not answering his question. So yes, so so as far as the education, we did have a criteria set that we would kind of rate someone's credibility by: were they in the military, are they law enforcement, how high. We don't use that so much anymore, but we are always looking at because it's not
profiling.
Well, I don't know if it's profiling so much, but it's not necessarily accurate. It can give us some insights, but we can use that insight without it too. So, but yeah, we're always, the main thing is, as an investigator, you try to go in there with a completely open mind, completely blank slate, and not make any judgments on what we just try to kind of what's happened. Tell us your story. But as far as like other witnesses and stuff, when they fill out the case online and submit it online, we ask so many questions. And one is, there multiple witnesses, so they can check the box and how many witnesses there were. But because you say nut job and it's kind of funny, ha ha ha. But occasionally we do have some people where we think there might be some mental illness happening. Because sometimes we got a report a couple of years ago. This guy was very concerned. He was very upset. He actually submitted, I think, a number of cases. He was really concerned and upset. He thought there was things in his house. He thought there was some things outside of his house. So he was taking pictures of them, and we did interview them and stuff. So we do interviews with them to kind of hear the story, because they can write their story and write the report. But when someone tells you the story, it fills in a lot of holes, and it really kind of paints the picture, as it were. He had a picture taken outside of his window at night, and there was definitely some lights outside of his window. And based on the location of his house, and we really tended to think it was like a farmhouse about a quarter mile away from him, is what we probably think it was. But, and then as far as the things in his house, he'd taken a number of pictures, and it looked like he was kind of moving the camera while he was taking them, because the pictures were very blurry and very kind of chaotic. And one of the pictures, this was my interpretation of it, not saying this is what it was, but as I looked at it, I saw the camera was moving, and what it looked like to me was, so you've got a smoke alarm in your house, and it's a wired one. So and it looked like they'd taken the smoke alarm off. So then what you get is the ring that hooks on the smoke detector, and then a couple wires coming down through the ceiling. That's what it looked like to me, and it looked like it was moving. So you couldn't really see clearly what it was. And so is he hoaxing us, or has he got a mental illness? And so it's kind of hard to assess that sometimes. And he seemed very sincere, seemed very upset and very concerned, and he kept reporting these things to us. And I think we told him, we don't think this is extraterrestrial. We don't think it's ET. We do think you should maybe seek some help, or you can talk about this and maybe get so even though we kind of sometimes will throw around the kind of joking terminology, for some people it is really traumatic. And it is like,
and there may be a mental. Make light of that,
no. But there is some of that. We try to be really sensitive to people, and because some people it's very frightening. So we really try to be sensitive to that too. So
you're going out, you have a little bit of a criteria, you investigate. You do you take pictures?
We can, depending on what the sighting is.
If there's anything to see.
Yeah, because sometimes the sighting is just a light going across, like those Starlink satellites, were just chains of lights going across the sky. Sometimes they get video of them, but there wasn't any evidence that was tangible when a string of lights go across the sky. So each case is different. So depending on what the case is like, depends on what kind of, because a lot of times we're just on the phone interviewing them, and we're doing some research on the internet, seeing what was the sky looking like that day and time and stuff. So.
Have you seen what has been maybe the most credible that you've seen, or where you go, this might be something kind of big?
As far as what kind of cases have come into Minnesota?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yep.
So you go out, you investigate. Have you come across anything where you go, wow, others have to hear about this. Let's get it to NASA, whoever.
Global sees it before we do, so they would know if it's something like that. And a lot of times, if they think there's something really legit there or serious, they'll mark it as a case of interest. So, well, hey, we think this may be something. We want you to really take a good look at this. We got a case of interest from headquarters within the past year or two, and it was these photographs up in the night sky, black sky, and there's this ring of lights. Nice big circle of lights, and it was really impressive photograph. It was really, you look at it and go, oh my gosh, what is that up there? What's up there in the clouds? And that's what they saw, and that's what they took it as. But as soon as it got to us, it was like 2 seconds, and we kind of knew what was going on there, because we just looked, where was this happening? Well, it's happened in Shakopee. Well, we get this about twice a year. Someone sees and reports the Mystic Lake casino lights, and it was like right down a shocking. So there's the Mystic, and they'd slowly rotate, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's a huge giant disc up in the clouds, and look at it rotating, and it's moving, and all of a sudden, poof, it's gone. It's like it just disappeared. Well, it's the Mystic Lake casino lights. Another case that happened, I didn't investigate this one, but it happened in the Midway area between Minneapolis and St. Paul. I think this happened in the 80s. People love this story. We call it the Midway case, but more casually we call it the Bug Eye case. There was a family of 5, so 2 parents and 3 kids, I believe. And from what we can tell, the younger son, I think it was about 3 or 4 years old, apparently he had established some sort of friendly friendship with what we're going to have to assume was an extraterrestrial entity. Because he was so young at the time, he couldn't really get good detailed interviews from him. But part of the story was he suddenly started talking about his friend Bug Eye. Well, as a parent, your 3-year-old child starts talking about their friend Bug Eye that they can't see, must be an invisible friend. So they kind of just wrote it off as that. We're calling the child Carl. That's not his name, but we called him Carl. She went to bed with Carl. Dad was out of town. They both woke up hearing like a big boom. Carl was like, he's back. And she's like, Daddy's back? He's like, no, him, my friend. Because he referred to as my friend or Bug Eye. And they got up, and their door going out to the backyard, they didn't have a regular lock. They had like a latch and like a stick or something they put through it, and it was taken off, and the door was wide open, and the porch was out there. So the door's wide open. They go out there, and Carl goes over this corner of the yard, and he kind of folds up his hands in a weird sort of way, and he starts swaying back and forth and started saying things like, the moon loves me, and the stars love me, and them love me, and just in a very strange way. In the morning when they woke up, the mother noticed she had some marks on her body, and her ears were hurting, and Carl's ears were hurting too, as well as his bottom. So, and they were red and irritated. So they went to the doctor and had it checked out, and they couldn't figure out why these marks were happening. And so a friend of their family had contacted us because they knew we had a field investigator. He went and investigated, was talking about it, and he brought Whitley Strieber's book Communion. If you've seen that, it's got that kind of gray alien on it. He kind of put it on the table. Carl came in and he saw the book Communion. He looked at it and went, my friend. So he's identifying what appears to be a gray alien as his friend. And why is he out there swaying, and the stuff in his ears and his bottom, and just, and she had some stuff going on too. Just very strange. And so apparently the best we can tell was, for some reason, this extraterrestrial, we'll call it that, created this friendship with this young boy living over in Midway area of St. Paul for whatever reason. They seemed to play together for a while. But,
what year was that?
That was in the mid to late 80s. So, and actually, our former chief investigator, great guy, who's now our secretary, he actually was investigating the case, and he was actually thinking of going back and following up with the family, because now Carl is much older than that, and they wanted to see. And I think he did visit him once, years after this event happened, and he said Carl struck him as being a very sensitive and intelligent and thoughtful person, which is probably a little more than you'd expect for his age. So, yeah.
So do you investigate not just UFOs, but if somebody says, hey, I've got a ghost in my house, do you guys get into that, or is it just strictly UFO?
We can't control what they report. A few years back at the symposium, we had a chapter director meeting, and they went really, really hard. And we do not say the BF word. We don't say Bigfoot. We don't talk about ghosts. We don't talk about anything else, because UFOs and ETs are real. Everything else is fiction. Because I think what was happening was, and I'm not sure, because they were kind of tight-lipped about it. They were hinting that someone was interested in us and our database, and we needed to maintain our credibility. So, and even orbs get kind of tricky, because a lot of times orbs don't appear to be solid. They appear to be more transparent, where a craft is a craft, and you can see a craft is solid, but an orb is not necessarily solid. So, we'll take the report if it comes in, but we don't specialize. There are people that specialize in, there are ghost hunters and Bigfoot hunters and stuff in Minnesota. Sure. So I've had some connections with some of them. So there are people that specialize in that, but we don't specialize in that. But like I said, we can't control what is reported to us. So
how many people are part of the Minnesota chapter?
Oh, our number's dropping. We were, for the longest time, I wanted us to break triple digits. I wanted to get us into 100, and we were so close for so long. We finally broke it. We were like at 102 or 103, and the next month we dropped a lot, and we've dropped. And so my assistant state director, he'd love to get us to 200. I applaud that. 200 would be fantastic. But
why Why do you need so many? I mean, why wouldn't you want to be in on more of the stories? What do you need so many people for?
Well, you want to grow it.
Yeah, it grows our membership, and people are participating and sharing and getting more information. And it
Do you pay
spreads.
to be a member?
There are different membership packages, yeah. And I think the cheapest one's like $50 a year. They have one package like I think about $300 a year, and they give you lots of swag and hats and shirts and pens and all sorts of stuff. And I was surprised too for our newer members are picking the more expensive packages, because I was going, if it were me, I'd pick the cheapest package I could get. But the majority of new memberships are of our more expensive packages. So I should explain that too. So that's to join the global organization. That gets you in the global organization. So then if you were to join the global organization with a Minnesota address, that automatically make you a member of the Minnesota chapter. Now, there are some chapters that require chapter membership too, which is separate from that. Minnesota doesn't require chapter membership. Northland MUFON launched recently, and I think they do have a membership fee option in Northland MUFON, but I'd have to check with some of their higher ups and make sure that that's correct. But to be a member of Minnesota MUFON, you just join the global organization with a Minnesota address, and you're automatically a member of our chapter.
And what's the criteria to actually be an investigator that goes out and investigates somebody?
So the first, you have to become a member first,
right?
And then from there you have to purchase the field investigator manual. So there's a manual that for training to train the field investigators. Then you go through this whole manual, study it, and it's not an easy read. It's not light reading. It's not very simple reading. And then once you go through that, you submit a report to the headquarters saying you've done the reading. Now you're ready to take the test. They will send you the test, and it's not an easy test either.
Oh,
so
there's an actual test.
There's an actual test. Yep. You can't
Do
just.
you get an official? I mean, do you get a card that shows, hey, I'm an investigator?
You can order cards like that, but I think you get a certificate and stuff. But yeah, it's not an easy test, and so it's not just pay your money and poof, now you're a field investigator, because you do have to pass a background check too, because we're sending people out to the public, and do we want people with certain criminal records doing this? No, we want to make sure that everybody's got clean records and they're reliable as we can tell anyways. So yeah, so pass a background check, take the test. A lot of people fail the test, and I think if you fail it like 2 or 3 times, I think they recommend you don't take it again for another year. So they go back to the manual, study the manual, come back later, because some people, if they fail the first time, like, oh, I'm going to take it again, I'm going to get it right this time. And if you do that 2 or 3 times, you're kind of like damaging your ego.
Give me an
and stuff.
example of what would be in that book. What type of? Give me, what's a chapter about?
So there might be a chapter on the different valet classification. So Jacques Vallée was J. Allen Hynek's assistant in Project Blue Book. And as they were gathering all these cases from a scientific point of view, when you start gathering all this data, what do you got to do with the data? You got to start finding similarities and differences. You need to start categorizing things. So Jacques Vallée and J. Allen Hynek created this valet classification system where it classifies or categorizes all the different sightings. So it'll go through, what the different sightings are. So there's 4 different categories.
Is that like the first kind, second kind, third kind?
Yeah, so it's maneuvers of the first kind, close encounters of the first kind, anomalies of the first kind.
Right.
And there's of the first kind, second kind, third kind, fourth kind, and fifth kind. So we've got so it'll go over all those different valet classifications and what those different things are. So, and it's interesting too, because everybody's heard of close encounters of the third kind. That's a valet classification. That's what MUFON uses that, because the movie, we hear that. And actually, J. Allen Hynek is in that movie too, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. If you know, you know that.
We watched the video on it.
Yeah, I've met his son a couple times. It's very cool.
Oh, okay.
So the valet, but CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, has gotten to be really kind of trendy in the past couple of years. And a couple of different organizations or researchers have kind of adopted the term of CE5. So they have their own separate definition of what a CE5 is. I know one person, he goes all the way up to CE8. None of our classifications go over CE5. But then another group's got a CE5, but it's different from our definition. So, you kind of say, well, who's right? Well, people can make up their own definitions. I say we've kind of cornered the market because we've got the full valet classification. We got all of them there. We have definitions for all of them. But if people want to grab CE5 and call it something else, I guess it's really up to them. But so that's kind of interesting how it's kind of got this kind of pop trend culture kind of thing going on.
Are you familiar with Stephen Greer?
Yeah, he's the one I was thinking of. He's got his own CE5 stuff. And I've actually gone to a couple CE5 events based on Stephen Greer's protocols and things. They're very interesting.
Did you ever call anything? Like, is that where, so a CE5 event, is that where you're sitting around kind of doing a meditational thing, trying to call extraterrestrials to you?
You're trying to draw them into you. So we were up in northern Wisconsin. There's a big group. They do it every year. It's called, there's a lake up there called Big Arborvitaes that they call the Big Arb. So there's a Big Arb CE5 event every year where they go out there for we were up there for a few nights, but I think they do it for about a week. And every night they go out to this big field and they do some rituals and kind of protocols, and they do they repeat this stuff in ceremoniously, and then we actually sit down in a big circle and we sit out there all night trying to draw the ETs in. And it was, it was interesting because you see different things. You'll see the International Space Station, you'll see Starlink, you'll see satellites, you'll see other stuff, you see airplanes, you see stuff you can't identify. Some people were convinced we were calling in extraterrestrial craft. I'm not sure all of them were. Some people thought they were seeing entities in the woods. I didn't see any entities in the woods. So some people at the same event, some people were seeing things and some people were not seeing things. And you might use that to discredit people, which I understand. But there's been UFO sightings too, where there'd be 3 people and one person can see the object and the other 2 can't.
Right. And
then none of them can. And then a different person can now see it and the other 2 can't. And then no one can. So it's almost like it's selecting who it's going to be visible to. So I'm not, so is it something with, or is it connecting with their brain, or is it a vibration or frequency where they're seeing different stuff? So could those people who've seen the entities in the CE5 event where I was at, where I didn't see any entities, were they actually seeing them, and I just couldn't see them, or were they just not seeing them? So, and again,
right.
I kind of reserve, I always say my jury's always out on most things. So I never come to the concrete conclusion because I'm always open to other possibilities.
Well, we've even discussed how almost all pictures or video that someone takes of what is a supposed UFO or craft is always blurred. And your rationale was?
I guess I just thought if it is some sort of advanced species or ET or something, they would have a pretty simple way of blocking it on your phone or pixelating it or blurring it,
so
whatever it may be.
Could be the rationale right there.
And blurring, it's a possibility. It could be an electromagnetic field, because you've all seen on the highway you get the mirage warping stuff. It could be something like that. It could be any number of things. There's been stories that on certain, I don't know if cell phones or iPhones, if you set the certain settings to like infrared, you'll see things that are there that you can't see with your naked eye. And people have claimed to have seen objects that way they can't see them, but when they hold their cell phone up and they get it that way. But
you just never know.
Have you ever heard of 0 point energy?
I've heard of it. I can't say a lot about it, but it sounds like if we could, if we haven't mastered it already, if we could actually start using that, but can't answer a lot of questions about it, but I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, because we had someone in here last episode. His name's Ashton Forbes, and he thinks a lot of what people are seeing are like classified technology, and it might be it might be our own stuff that the government actually figured out. And one of the things he brought up was 0 point energy, and it might have been something that we figured out. Yeah, and that's what we're actually seeing a lot of times.
And that's very plausible because, I think it was the Black Hawk, the big SR-71, the big black planes, we had them for many years before it was revealed to the public. So is it government technology that we're not aware of? That's very possible. You've heard the phrase, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. I think of the government more like the right thumb doesn't know what the right forefinger is doing, because things are so compartmentalized. You could be very close to something and not knowing what's going on, even though you're right there. So, yeah, it's hard to say what they know and what they don't know.
What are your thoughts on guys like George Knapp?
I think George Knapp's a great investigator. I think the work he's done has been good for the field and good for the public. He's a journalist. I'll plug a friend of mine, much like Paula Harris is an investigative journalist. She's not a UFO investigator. She's an investigative journalist who focuses on the UFO phenomenon. And he's done a lot to bring, I think, credibility to the topic. He's put in the public eye again. And I think I've met George once or twice. But yeah, I definitely like George and what he does. I think he does good work.
What do you think? I guess what I'm really interested in is the disclosure. There's a disclosure coming up now on I think the 13th of this month, because there was the one I think a couple years ago or so, and now there's another one. I don't know. I'm just interested
disclosure for what?
More. I mean, I think the government did come out and say there is UAPs that they don't know what it is. It's not our stuff. So they're at least admitting like there's stuff out there. We can't explain it. It looks like it's past our technology. We don't know what it is. And now it's becoming kind of a threat in some instances when there's pilots and stuff and, are flying around. But this guy, Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp, and then there's like David Grush and Lou Elizondo.
Oh, yeah.
They're basically whistleblowers, and they're coming forward and they're saying the government is well aware that there's ETs and these UAPs, and now it's come to Congress where they're having a congressional hearing to try and get more evidence and get more details on what's actually going on.
Yep.
Like they're trying to make it public because they feel like it's hidden and it's suppressed from the public.
Yeah.
So,
and I've heard, the next 6 months something big, next 12 months something big, next 18 months something big. But when it comes to disclosure, some people are going to tell you disclosure is never going to happen. Some people have said it's already happened. Some people are saying it's happening gradually. I'd probably say it's more happening gradually because, France has come out and said, yes, ETs are real, they're extraterrestrial, we don't know what they are. There's a South American country did the same thing too, I think Brazil. But so a couple of governments have actually said this is the deal and been very open and public about it. U.S., not so much. So disclosure, I think it's slowly happening.
I've heard 2027 too. Have you ever heard that?
That's the thing where I said I reserve judgment. It's always out. My jury's always out because that's the thing. Because I've been hearing it's going to happen this time for so many years, and it's never happened. I generally just don't hold my breath. I just wait and see, and I'm just kind of open to what shows up. So,
What do you think could be the fallout if the government did come up and say, "Hey, here's pictures, here's video, they're here"? What do you think would be the fallout? Do you think that would be a panic situation for the country? Do you think it would be everybody just go, "Oh, that's cool. Let's say hi to ET," or do you?
Yeah. So because they'll always go back to, well, when they did the War of the Worlds broadcast, everybody went crazy. They were jumping out of buildings. Well, you know what? When they did the War of the Worlds broadcast, it was an attack on the entire planet. And, so if they're going to be honest about it, our planet's not under attack for all intents and purposes, not in that regard. So, because they're like, oh, look how people reacted. We can't put the people through that. I think the people are a lot smarter than we're being given credit for. I think we're a lot more durable than we're given credit for. I think it's going to maybe be shocking and upsetting to some people, but overall, I don't think it's going to be that traumatic. I don't think it's going to be that bad. They'll say, oh, all the religions will collapse. I don't believe that's going to happen either. I think there's room for all of that in there, but I don't think it's going to be this devastating thing because part of that is too, for them to do that, it's the government coming out and saying, hey, we're not in control. We can't protect you. We can't keep you safe. We don't know what this is. And who wants to do that? What government wants to do that and tell their people, hey, we're helpless here. We can't do anything about it. They don't want to do that. So, which is understandable. So
yes, exactly.
And that might upset some people. I don't think it's going to be this big disastrous avalanche kind of thing, but that's just my opinion. So, and I've been with MUFON for quite a few years now, and I think people can handle the truth. The whole Jack and you can't handle the truth. I think we can handle the truth.
How often does MUFON meet?
Well,
your chapter.
Our chapter meets monthly.
And they're out of New Brighton?
Well, yes.
Okay.
We've been meeting online lately, for a number of reasons, but we're online for now. We'd like to be back in person in New Brighton. Northland MUFON meets in two places up in northern Minnesota, and one's near one's closer to Duluth and the other one's closer to Fargo. They meet at the same time and they're connected on Zoom too. So they have one meeting in two locations. We meet once a month. So.
And did you say that there's a national convention?
There's a national convention, yeah.
Have you been to that?
I've been to a few of them, yeah.
And what's that like? I mean, is that like a Comic-Con type thing where everybody's just going wild? And
no, it's so Comic-Con. I haven't been to a Comic-Con, but as I understand it, Comic-Con has many, let's call them channels, like many different presentations at the same time. The symposium does not. It's one presentation at a time. So it's not wild and crazy, although sometimes if you go down to the bar at the end of the day, because we had one of our former state directors he would do the meetings and stuff, and he'd go, yeah, we'll meet down at the bar afterwards where the real ufology happens, So, but yeah, it's very interesting. We have Stanton Friedman was he was a member of MUFON. He was a regular contributor to our journals. I'd see him at the symposiums when he was still around, so that was kind of cool. So you'd see some of these big names, like Lou Elizondo wasn't at MUFON. I think I saw him at Paula Harris's Star Works USA conference. So they're pretty serious, but they can be a lot of fun. And the nice thing is, everybody there kind of has at least some same foundation in their beliefs, because a lot of people go, I can't talk to my friends about this, can't talk to my family about this. There's nowhere I can go to talk to. They come to Minnesota MUFON and there's people they can talk to. So the symposium is the same way, but it's also international people. So you get to meet people from around the world. Now, most of them are from America, but you do get to meet people from other parts of the world and stuff, which is interesting. Get to know them, share stories, and hear things. So, and you're always getting some cutting edge stuff from MUFON, what MUFON's on top of, and the speakers talking about different stuff. It's very educational, but it's a lot of fun. And they have different things too, different events. Like I think last time there was There's a space museum not far you could go to, and when we had it in Las Vegas one year, they had little day tours out to Roswell and things like that, and you can go to the little alien cafe and stuff. So they also have other side stuff where you can go do and things like that. So.
Have you been to Roswell then?
I have been to not to Roswell, but I've been to Area 51 and I've been to the little alien. So yeah, because they took us out to the back gate of Area 51, not the front gate.
Anything to see?
The back gate, there's a lot to see. There's lots of fences and there's lots of cameras and lots of signs saying don't take pictures of this and don't step across this line. And
So
stuff.
it's definitely still active?
Well, this is a number of years ago, but I believe it was. It was funny, too, because they were taking us down in a bus, and we were going at a pretty good clip down there. As we were going down there, we're, like I said, in a bus, and this big black SUV went flying by. I mean, we were probably going 80 or 90. It just passed us like crazy. And the tour guy was like, yep, that's the guy who's on his way to Area 51. He's going to get to the back gate. He wants to get in there before we get there, so we don't see him. So, which we thought was interesting. And sure enough, once we kind of pulling up to the back gate, he was already inside the fence, and the car was there, and it moved on. And a few minutes after we pulled up, another SUV comes pulling up, but it wouldn't pass us because it didn't want us to see it. So it sat there for I don't know how long, and I very casually took a picture of it, and I was kind of looking around and stuff. And then I looked back later, and it was gone, just wasn't there. I was like, where did that thing? Because it was right there. And sure enough, when we went to leave, they turned the bus around as we're leaving. 1.5 miles, 2 miles down the road, there it was sitting off to the side of the road waiting for us to leave because it didn't want us to see as it was going through the gate and the security coming out and stuff. So yeah, it's pretty active and stuff. So at the back gate. So
right.
What are your thoughts on Bob Lazar?
Bob Lazar, yeah, good question. So I know Bob Lazar gets knocked around a lot, and it's been a while since I looked at a lot of his stuff, but I believe he's sincere. I believe he's genuine. I believe he's telling the truth, and some of the stuff he's talked about has proven to become true. So yeah. But that's the thing, discredit the person, you can discredit the story. Throw out the person, you can throw out the story. And I think Bob has a lot of credibility, and it was very gutsy and courageous to do what he did. So,
yeah, time is vindicating. So,
yep.
Go ahead, give the audience a little more background on Bob Lazar.
Do you know the backstory on him? I mean, he was pretty much the one that put Area 51 on the map. He kind of came forward and said there's a base, this S4, that I think in Los Alamos or something that he was working out of, and that's where he met George Knapp and went live with it. So
yep. And he'd been working there for a long time, and he finally decided he needed to come forth with a story because there were a lot of people at Area 51 getting sick from some of the stuff that was going on there, and he started reporting that this is what's happening, and he got discredited. And I think even like his high school yearbook where he claimed he went to high school, if you go look at the yearbooks now, his picture isn't in it, where so it's like they were like kind of nicely erasing him. Yeah, so erasing him from history, which is really kind of freaky and interesting. So yeah, but and he's been a lot of speculation. A lot of people dragged him through the mud. A lot of people praise him. So and he's really got nothing to gain for it. I mean, the whole thing kind of wrecked his life, I think. So, but.
And he came out originally to protect himself. Like he went to George Knapp because I think they were monitoring his phone calls, and he tried taking a group of friends up to show him the UFO that he was working on or something like that.
Well, are we missing anything that we should bring up before we close things out, or can you?
Oh, you want to get rid of me already?
No, you stick around. Let's have at it. But
well, I mean, I've had 2 sightings myself. People always say, "Have you had any sightings yourself?" And I have had 2 sightings. I haven't reported on MUFON because there's some we really like to get a good date on sightings because that helps us to kind of narrow when things exactly happen. And I don't have a good date for either one of them, but if you'd like to,
were there multiple witnesses?
Both sightings were multiple witnesses. Yes.
Had you been drinking?
No, definitely not the first time, and not the second time either. So, and that's the thing because people say, "Have you had any sightings?" And I've seen a lot of stuff, and a lot of times I go, "That could be. It might not be." And if I really can kind of go, it could be something else, I'll kind of dismiss it. But these 2 I can't dismiss as being anything other than non-human or extraterrestrial or ET craft. And one was a single object sighting. The other was multiple objects. So
what was the first one?
The first one was, so if you look at the western border of Minnesota, there's this little bump in the side. Mm-hmm. My dad's hometown is like right in that bump, very close to South Dakota, called Beardsley. And this is when I was preschool. So we'd go out to visit Beardsley, and there was a friend of the family. They had a farm out there too, and of course they had a horse, and the horse's name was Johnny Cash. Well, come on, if you're a little kid and there's a horse named Johnny Cash, you got to go see the horse named Johnny Cash. I mean, come on, you got to go see Johnny Cash. So we'd go out and visit Johnny Cash, and we were out there one night, and it was like me and my siblings, and I think there was some other kids, maybe some cousins or other kids, and we were out running around playing, and this was kind of the sun was going down and whatnot, but it was still pretty bright out. And I remember we were running down the driveway, and the driveway's a gravel road. It's like a quarter mile down the gravel road to the road. And it's like a half a mile either way to either intersection, and there's no farmhouses around. Across the street's corn, across the intersection's corn. It's like, out like that. So we're running down the driveway toward the road, and I remember we kind of looked off to the side, and so there was the road, and then there's the intersection, then across the intersection, cornfield, because that's all there is out there is cornfield. And above the cornfield, sitting at like a 25-degree angle, was a silver cigar-shaped object, very bright on the bottom, but the rest was a cigar-shaped object. And we stood there and looked at it, and I'm thinking UFO. Well, actually, I wasn't thinking UFO, but I was fascinated by what I was seeing. And eventually, the other kids were looking at it too, but it wasn't moving. It wasn't doing anything. So they went back to play, but I wanted to see it move. So I stood there for a while, but I wanted to play too. So I went back and played for a while, came back, and it was still there. I wanted to see it move, and it didn't move. And so I went back to playing and came back. It was still there. And finally, I did it a few times, and I came back, and it was gone. I was disappointed because I didn't see it move. And of course, I was preschool, so maybe 4 years old maybe. And I was a very, very bright preschool. I was very smart. Now, this is the early 70s, so I knew exactly what I was looking at. Because I'd seen I Dream of Jeannie, and that's Major Nelson, and he's in his rocket on the way to the moon, because that's Major Nelson's rocket. So I knew, I was able to deduce that NASA was somewhere in western Minnesota, near Beardsley, Minnesota. So, that's how smart I was. It wasn't until a few years later when I got into grade school, and went, oh, that wasn't Major Nelson, that wasn't I Dream of Jeannie, that was a UFO, and NASA's not there. So
you said it was on the ground?
No, it was above the corn. You can see it above the corn at about a 25-degree angle.
How high was it?
It's hard to say.
But it was in a cornfield.
Above the cornfield. It was over a cornfield.
Which is interesting, because that's where they had crop signs.
Crops. And that's the thing, too, because I've talked to my dad. He passed away a couple years ago, but I was talking to my dad, and he said, cattle mutilations and stuff in that part of the state in South Dakota is extremely common, but no one talks about them. He said, they might be at the little corner 5 and dime or whatnot, and the cashier might say, oh, did you hear Larry lost another one? Oh, really? Yeah, no, didn't hear that. And they just they keep it really hush-hush.
That's in Minnesota?
Yeah, it's Beardsley, Minnesota.
Because I've heard of Skinwalker.
Yep.
Skinwalker Ranch, where they have the cattle mutilation, but I didn't know that. Would you say that's what sparked your interest and got you kind of into this?
Well, that's hard to say, too, because I was born in 1969. So at that time, Star Trek was out, Lost in Space was out, Marvin the Martian was in all the cartoons. So I was born into a culture where extraterrestrials and ETs were very much in the culture. So it wasn't that unusual. So it wasn't foreign to me. It wasn't alien to me, as it were. So
in closing here, why don't we give a little plug to your chapter of MUFON?
Sure.
Maybe we could even put up something, get the information
from
you.
The graphics.
If somebody, because I just think this is fascinating, and I think a lot of people would be interested in. I bet they have no idea that MUFON exists and that they can actually join it.
Yep.
But how do they go about that? I mean, is there a place online for like MUFON.com?
MUFON.com is the actual website. Yeah.
Really?
So, yeah. And there's
and you can fill out an application there to get on board.
Yep. You
and is there a schedule of when you guys have your meetings locally, is it a Zoom meeting? Did you say? Or
well, we do it on Zoom, but different chapters do things different ways. So we do have mnmufon.com, but that's not ready yet. So all of the Minnesota MUFON stuff is on the northlandmufon.com website. So you can see all of our stuff and their stuff there too. So MUFON.com and NorthlandMUFON.com. We will have MNMUFON.com, and that site's not ready yet, but but Northland MUFON covers all of our stuff. They promote us too, so they're good people up there. So
we got to get you up over 100. So
we
can send some people.
Make Jared happy. Jared will be happy if we get over 200. I'd be happy over 200 too, but
if we go on the website, does it also have documentation of the investigations that have gone on for the different Minnesota sightings? You say there's 6 to 8 reports a month.
Yeah.
Is there any of that information that's available to the public at large so they could see what's going on out there?
Yeah, remind me to tell you about the big database. But as far as that goes, yes. So in our MUFON meeting every month, I do a segment called What's Up in Minnesota, where I talk about the cases that have been reported in Minnesota. So I start on updates. So those are cases that I've shown them previously that weren't completed, that are now completed.
Oh, okay.
So I show them how they close
that
out.
would be interesting.
And then I go into new cases. And now the new cases, some might be completed, some might not be. So I talk about all the cases that have come in since our last meeting.
And this is just for Minnesota?
Just for Minnesota. Right. And you can see those recordings on our YouTube channel. So we've got recordings of that on our YouTube channel. And as far as what I want to tell you about, we've got a new, the global organization has a new offering. And it's not for members only. It is for the general public. And right now I think it's $50 a year. And it's called Project Aquarius. And Project Aquarius you can have access to all kinds of our stuff as far as our newsletters, our symposium proceedings, our sketch gallery from all those drawings that have been submitted with the cases. You can look at some of our cases. But there's a section too that they call them different rooms, and there's a room that's the I think it's the media archive, and that one's free to the public. Everything else is $50 a year, and you get so much stuff. But the free to the public one is like the media gallery, and it's newspaper clippings from all over the world going back to the 50s and more, all sorts of UFO sightings. So at $50 a year for the amount of information you're getting, it's just staggering.
Really?
Could not.
Very reasonable.
So we're trying to make that as transparent and available, because it used to be you can go to MUFON.com, and I think you can click on it's like UFO cases or something that you can see like the last 10 or 20 cases submitted globally. You can see, you can't see all the information because you can't see the names and stuff, but you can see a lot of information on the cases, and that's constantly updating because the last 10 or 20 globally is always changing. But as far as Minnesota stuff, I've been doing What's Up in Minnesota for several years. We don't have them all on videotape, but we've got some of them on videotape, so they're going up on YouTube, and we're going to continue to do that. My assistant state director, Jared Nelson, he's doing all that stuff. He's doing a fantastic job, and he's getting my What's Up in Minnesota, getting them put on YouTube and stuff, so you can see the most current cases that we've had for the past couple of years on our YouTube channel.
Is Jared an investigator too?
He's an investigator. He's my assistant state director. He's one of the leaders up in Northland MUFON too. So he's a real mover and shaker.
Any area in Minnesota that seems to have more sightings? Does the Northland seem to have more sightings than the local Twin City stuff?
It's funny too, because Northland is relatively new, and once they've kicked off, and now we're getting more sightings from up there because now they're having meetings up there. Every once in a while we'll get hot spots. I mentioned Craig Lang earlier. When he was state director, there was a section of 35W from here, between here and I think Forest Lake. He was calling it the UFO highway because there's lots of hot spots along 35W or 35 for some reason. Why that was, I don't know, but I think it's kind of cooled down. So, and what's the schedule on it? There's no real schedule or pattern to it, so we can't really say why something's becoming hot and something's not. And part of it is, this might sound redundant, but to have a UFO sighting, you need a couple things. You need a UFO in the area. You need someone to see the UFO. You need someone to report it. So you have those three things have to happen before we're even aware of it. So you could have UFOs everywhere, but if no one's seeing them, because in Minnesota, come February, March, April, our sightings drop down. Because who's outside in Minnesota in February up looking at the sky? We're inside.
There's no UFOs around at that time anyway.
Well, there are some, but we get.
They don't like the cold either.
Right.
They migrate south.
But you get into like May and June and July, we'll get more cases again and stuff. So because people are out and about and looking around at things more. So
well, there you have it, Tom. It has been a pleasure having you with us, and maybe you can come back if you have any. Obviously, give us a holler if you have any new sightings that are worthy of us sitting down again.
If I have a landing in my front yard and
just make sure to take a picture.
Yeah, do you want a blurry picture?
Yeah. We'll take whatever.
Okay,
Thanks again for stopping
by.
Not
a problem. Thanks for having me.
We want to remind everyone, if you are looking for some great music with some incredibly talented musicians, be sure and stop by Leur Musique in St. Michael. It's a guaranteed good time. Also, don't forget, if you want to keep the good times rolling out on the golf course, stop by On the Green in Blaine. They have state-of-the-art simulators. They have leagues, hundreds of courses to choose from. They even have a scramble format that sounds like it's a real blast. We also want to thank everyone out there for stopping by. If you're not a subscriber, please do. We hope to have you back next week for another exciting episode of Curious Crossroads. Until then, have a good day.
Have a good life.